So one of the issues is the free response questions. Everybody knows kind of at this point, probably through all of the drilling and tutoring you've had on multiple choice tests, and you also have probably a good sense of what to do with free writing, free response writing. In this case, we basically need to know what kind of free response writing you do for AP Government. Hopefully you already know that because we've done a few, but just in case, we're going to do another one. So this is the second free response question on the 2013 exam that we're going to run through. And first off, we're going to look at the directions that you have for all of the free response questions on the 2013 exam and the exam you're going to have this year. Directions. You have 100 minutes to answer all four of the following questions. Unless the directions indicate otherwise, respond to all parts of all four questions. It is suggested that you take a few minutes to plan and outline each answer. Spend approximately 1/4 of your time, 25 minutes, on each question. In your response, use substantive examples where appropriate. All right, so that's something we need to do. So each of these questions is worth the same amount of points, and this is important to understand, even though there is a rubric for each one, and each one is scored differently. Like this one's going to be 6 points. And another one on the exam was 5 points. But that's only in terms of how you divide up the points each question has. Each question is worth 1/4 of 50% of your overall test grade on this thing, which means each one is worth 12.5%. This one has 6 points, which means each point is really a little over 2% of the overall test score. There was another exam question that had 5 points. So each of those questions each one of those points is really worth 2.5%, not just a little over 2%. So it's just, it doesn't matter. When you look at the points each one is worth, all that matters is understanding that those are tasks. Each point represents a task that you're supposed to accomplish on that particular free response question. So the prompt is, political parties play important roles in United States elections and government institutions. Over the past several decades, the influence of political parties in elections has declined, while their strength in Congress has increased. And this is the part of the prompt that is the introduction. It's kind of they're trying to prime the pump. They're trying to remind you a little bit of what you're supposed to know already, and then they get into the nitty-gritty details about what you're going to do in the next part of the prompt. So this is from your perspective, probably the important part of the prompt, but you read the other part of the prompt to kind of understand what it is you're going to be doing. This is what you're going to be doing in detail. So here we go. Describe 2 important functions of political parties in United States elections. Describe 1 important role political parties play within Congress to promote the party's public policy agenda. Explain how each of the following factors has weakened the influence of political parties over the political process. And they give 2 factors, direct primaries and candidate-centered campaigns. Explain how party polarization has strengthened party influence in Congress. So you've got this stuff about how the party has weakened. Well, you've got functions of political parties. You've got how the party has been weakened. And then you've got the part about how the party has strengthened in Congress. So, see, let's break it down. These are the 6 points. This is my breakdown of what they want you to do. You have to give the first important function of parties in elections and the second important function of parties in elections as far as the ones you can think of. You have to give 2 important functions. And that's how you break that down. You get a point for the first one you bring up. You get a point for the second one you bring up. Then you get a point for the 1 role parties play in Congress to promote parties' policy agenda that you decide to cover. There are multiple answers to these things. You have to explain how direct primaries have weakened party influence. How has the direct primary weakened party influence? How has the candidate-centered campaign weakened party influence? This is how you break down the tasks you need to accomplish. How has party polarization strengthened party influence in Congress? And when you write your answers to these things, it should be you can write a long time if you want to, but you probably ought to go over each one of these with at least 2 or 3 sentences minimum. In reality, it's fairly easy to get the points if you're really on it and know everything there is to know about it. You can very quickly write words down in short order to answer each one of these tasks. But chances are you're going to be stressed and you're going to be kind of, as you're writing, working around trying to figure out the answer. And half the time you're going to have the answer and you're not sure it's the answer because it's a long test and you've been taking a bunch of them. So don't be afraid to write paragraphs of more than 3 sentences for each of these. I'm just saying, if you've got it all figured out in your head, you don't have to write a whole lot to get these points. Chances are you don't, though. So how could you answer the 2 functions of parties in an election? These are the answers they gave in their rubric that would qualify. You may be able to come up with some that they didn't include in this list. But these are things you could say to get the points. You could point out that political parties provide cues for voters as far as what they should vote for, what they should support. Political parties provide platforms for issues to be discussed and debated. Political parties recruit candidates for government office. Political parties nominate candidates for government office. It sounds like the same thing. It's kind of different. If you're to use both, you might have to explain the difference to use both for your 2 functions. Political parties raise funds for their candidates' campaigns. Political parties support their candidates' campaigns. There are other ways that they can support a candidate's campaign besides raising funds. So you can bring that up. They can bring in party leaders to endorse the candidate, to show up in his advertisements, his commercials, make speeches for him, send out letters saying the party loves this guy and wants you to vote for them. Political parties mobilize voters and get the vote out. One of the arguments that was made as far as why Obama won the second time around is because of their special secret weapon, which was incredibly computer smart individuals who sat around and did number crunching and figured out A, where they were leading, and B, who to talk to and who to motivate and who to get to show up to vote. If you remember in that last election, Mitt Romney thought that he had a real strong position, and then he got blasted away. And the whole time, Obama's team had done a lot of number crunching analysis and figured out that they were good and felt very confident about what they were doing. Why? Because they had done a lot of analysis and they knew exactly how to mobilize voters and get the votes out. Sometimes parties literally rent buses to go by people's homes who can't get to the polling place on their own and pick them up and take them there so they can vote. So when I say get the vote out, I mean sometimes literally they get the vote out. Okay. Now you get a point for explaining one role parties have in Congress to promote policy. And there are a bunch of ways you could have said this. This is from their rubric. The leadership in Congress assigns people to committees on a party basis. Party leaders articulate legislative priorities. Party leaders facilitate, which means help further legislative priorities. Majority party selects committee chairs to promote the party policy. The majority party appoints and controls the standing committees. The majority party controls floor debates, and the majority party controls rules and the calendar as far as when bills are heard to favor their party's policy priorities. These are all ways you can answer that part of the prompt, and you only have to give one of these. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ways to answer that AP figured out and put in their little deal that they gave over this. That's available on the internet, and I'm going to talk about that at the end of this PowerPoint. Okay, there are 3 ways that they figured out that you could get the point for how direct primaries weaken parties. How can they? Well, parties have less control over the nomination process of candidates. Candidates can bypass the parties and directly appeal to voters. And candidates not favored by party leaders can win anyway. How candidate-centered campaigns weaken parties. You have to give explanation of how that works. And they gave 3 ways that you can answer that. One of them is also a way you can answer the other one. If you're going to use it for both, you better very, very clearly say, hey, this applies to this and then it applies to that as well. Just heads up on that. You have to be clear about what you're answering to some extent, but there's a catch, and I'll explain that later. So how can candidate-centered campaigns weaken parties? Candidates can appeal directly to voters. Sound familiar? Candidates can raise money through voters or PACs directly. In other words, candidates don't need to get their money from the parties in order to run for office. And candidates choose their own issues to campaign on as a result of candidate-centered campaigns. And you can look at this and you can see how this works out. Some members of the Republican Party right now are what are called Tea Party members. They're not part of the establishment, and that's kind of essentially a dissenting group within the party. And it works because we have candidate-centered campaigns now. So, all right, so how party polarization has strengthened party influence in Congress. And they give one example, really. They give 2, but they're pretty much flip sides of the same coin here. Party members are voting the party line more often, and party members are less likely to cross party lines to vote with the other party. Flip sides of the same coins. It's really very obvious, and I think for a lot of you, it's the reason why you would not get this point. Because you would look at this and think, duh, how has party polarization strengthened party influence in Congress? You'd be looking for some deep, meaningful answer to that and overlook just writing down, they vote with the party more. Because that just seems kind of like an obvious thing that is understood and you wouldn't have to put down. But that's all you've got. And remember that. When you're looking at a question, you're looking at part of a question, you're having trouble answering it, and you think it's hard, look at it and go, well, what obviously follows? What's obvious that I could write about this? And when you write the obvious thing, a lot of times that'll get you the point. Now, you can't write information that's in the question and expect to get a point for that, though. Telling me that political parties decline, or telling AP that political parties are declining in some way to try to answer one of these, that was in the prompt, remember? That's not going to get you anywhere. So this is what you needed to do. Describe 2 functions of parties in elections. Explain one role the party has in Congress to promote the party. Explain how direct primaries weaken parties. Explain how candidate-centered campaigns weaken parties. And explain how polarization strengthened party influence in Congress at the same time that parties are being weakened by the primary system in candidate-centered campaigns. So now we're going to look at an actual student response. This is available at AP Central in their exam questions section. So you can look at actual student responses. And by the way, this is a great way to review for the test. They cover a lot of ground in these free response questions. So it's a sneaky way to not only check yourself on how you do the free response questions, it's also a great way to cover the content by just going through and reading the free response questions and reading the good answers. Don't read the bad answers for that. Read the good answers, and you can find those. You have to have Adobe. You have to be able to bring up a PDF on your computer. But if you can look at. There's several links for each question. Find the one that has the sample questions. You look at the back of it. It'll tell you which of the essays has the good score. I think it's always the first one is the best score. So you can get an idea. And it'll tell you why they have the best score, which I've done for you. I typed all this up from one of the samples. So here we go. I've underlined the parts of their answer that gave them a point. So as I read this out, that the part that's underlined is the part that gave them a point. All right. So this person, when they wrote this, they labeled things. And if you'll notice, they didn't always start off with a proper sentence format. So here we go. A1. Aid candidates in their campaigns by establishing a party platform and having the candidates stick to it. Political parties unite people that share the same political views in an election. They create a strong party base and unite the electorate. 2. Help contribute to campaigns by donating money to campaigns. Hold conventions to gain support of their party. They also hold debates that are televised. They are responsible for educating voters on their candidates' views. Continued. 2. The majority party in Congress promotes their party's public policy agenda, especially in the House. The majority party has the power to place major party members on powerful committees in order to have their public policy bills passed. Their role in placing members on committees and delegating rules to how bills will be debated promote their public policy agenda and allow it to be passed more easily. Can you see what I'm talking about when I say you don't have to write a ton to get the points, but chances are you're a little worn out and a little stressed out, and you're probably going to have to write some stuff down, and eventually you'll get that one line that will get you the point. You know, exactly. Don't sit there, write 2 lines, go, I got that, and move on. You might want to flesh it out a little bit. C1. Direct primaries. Dash. Candidates used to be chosen at party conventions by members of the party. They could choose the candidates they believed would enforce the party's platform the most. With direct primaries, this power has been taken away from them, and they no longer have direct influence over what candidates will be chosen, that they will have to advocate for. For example, in the recent 2012 election, Mitt Romney was not as conservative as the Republican Party would have favored. And when he ultimately lost the election, the party blamed it on how he did not stick to their platform enough. If they had retained the power to choose their candidates, then the outcome of the election could have been different. Now he's, or she, has made an assumption about what the Republican Party favored at the time, and that's debatable, but it's okay. It's an example that's reasonable, and it can be viewed as a hypothetical anyway. So even if it was very clear that this person was wrong about Mitt Romney being not as conservative as the Republican Party would have favored, that wouldn't count against them. Really, it could be used as a hypothetical. You know, it's a little dicey because, after all, he did win the primary. And they're saying that party leadership didn't want Romney. That's debatable too. Very debatable if you actually know what was going on. But it doesn't matter. That's not what they were really looking for anyway. And remember, when they're scoring these, they're looking for the right answer to give you a point. They're not looking for things to take off. And you guys know that, right? So unless it's extremely wrong, it won't invalidate your answer. They're looking for the right answer. Candidate-centered campaigns. Because campaigns have become more focused on the candidates rather than the party platform. Before, the party was able to accomplish what it wanted, while now the candidate has the ability to stray from the party's goals. People are starting to focus more on who a candidate is and what they stand for rather than the party they belong to. This causes more candidate-centered than party-centered voting and less of a strong base for political parties. This has weakened the influence of political parties over the political process because voters are beginning to pay less attention to the party than the candidate, and the candidate can stray from what the party wants. And I kind of said that before. It's okay to repeat yourself a little bit while you're rambling along trying to get this done. For example, Mitt Romney was criticized for having public health care while he was governor of Massachusetts, which went against his party platform. And again, that's also a little complicated because it was against the party platform at that point. However, when Mitt Romney introduced that health care reform, the kind of health care that Obama was pushing was actually at one time promoted by members of the Republican Party. So it's a little more complicated than people want to accept and so on. But that's not going to be an issue on whether he gets a point or not. So if you've paid attention, you've noticed there's not been a thesis statement, and this person is not always using proper grammar. I mean, what they're writing is very clear and easy to understand, even though it's not always technically, grammatically correct. Okay, and that's important. You need to be writing in a clear fashion. You don't want to leave the grader an opportunity to get confused and not get you a point. But you don't have to stress out on an introductory paragraph or a thesis or anything like that. You have to answer the prompt. AP, answer the prompt. So now the one on party polarization. Party polarization is a greater amount of separation in the two main parties' ideals and a great separation on their ideas on public policy, foreign policy, and other main issues. Their differences in ideology strengthen their influence in Congress because Congress members vote based more on their party association. Because the two main parties disagree so much, when bills are actually passed, they contain at least one aspect the party supports because most members have to like the bill to pass it, whether it is their party's bill or not. For example, the debate of gun control in Congress has become so polarized that if an agreement is actually met, then each party will have an aspect of the bill that they like. Members of Congress are more likely to vote for a bill in their party's favor if there is a big divide in ideology, increasing the party influence in Congress. Okay, so a lot of that is just kind of rambling around saying stuff that really doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily wrong, it just doesn't answer the prompt. So this was a really long kind of searching around, reaching around, trying to find that answer, and finally gets the point at the last possible moment. Might have gotten the point earlier on when he says, let's see, what is it? Their differences in ideology strengthen their influence in Congress because Congress members vote based more on their party association. However, it's not very specific. It's broad. It could be interpreted as not really answering the prompt. Okay? But got much more specific with that last sentence. And that's why you use your time. You don't write real short answers to free response questions, get done in 25 minutes, and then sit there for 75 minutes and chill. Because you may have kind of answered it, but they don't know what you mean. There's room for interpretation that goes a different way. You left a word out that would have gotten you the point. You need to go back and look through your free response questions if you have extra time and make sure that you've been clear enough. And toss down some more information if you know more. Use your time. Don't just sit there and massage your hand because you've been writing a lot. Or take a nap. And I hear about you nap takers on the free response questions. So how the student earns 6 points on this thing? What did they say? They said the parties provide an issue platform to create a strong party base. The parties raise funds for candidates' campaigns. That direct primaries take away the party's direct influence over candidate choice. That the majority party selects committee members to push the party policy. That candidate-centered campaigns causes voters to pay less attention to what parties want. And that members of Congress are more likely to vote the party line if there is a big ideological divide on an issue. That's basically how they answered it. And if you remember looking through the rubric, there are a bunch of other ways to answer this thing. So, some last points to make on this. You don't have to label your answers the way this sample did. In fact, all their samples in 2013 are labeled. It doesn't say anything in the prompt about labeling your answers. People do that, as it points out on the slide. If you label your answers, it can help you organize your thoughts. And that's true. But I have been told that if you label your answers, the grader can look for correct answers only in the area you label. So if you label A1, then the part of the prompt that deals with A1, that's the only place they're going to give you credit for saying the thing that you need to say to get the point for A1. That's what I've been told. So, if you really have to label things so that you kind of know where you're going, then that's fine. But you can always answer each part of the prompt in a block, skip a few lines so you to go to the next block, so you can go back and add if you need to, and that way you keep yourself organized, but you don't limit where the grader will look for correct answers. Okay? So yeah, your question?
So it's supposed to go hand back to label it?
Yeah. So it comes down to if you feel like you need it as a crutch. If you need to label to keep yourself straight, do it. I mean, if you really think you need to. But, and this really probably comes down to how stressed you are while you're writing. If you're not feeling particularly stressed and you think you can handle another simple thing, then you go ahead and write your little tiny block paragraph for each one, skip a couple of lines so you can add to that later, and you go through, and A1 is your first block, and then A2 is your second block, and B is your that's what you would do. If you do it that way, then if you say the right thing that would answer any of the prompt tasks anywhere in the essay, which isn't really an essay, it's just a big long answer, then you get the point. But if you label, then you're telling them that you don't. If you write a sentence that would have answered A1 and you do it in C, if you have it labeled, they know that what you're trying to answer and that doesn't answer it. I know it sounds weird, but that's what I've been told. They're a little persnickety on how they grade these things sometimes. So keep that in mind. Okay, so last week review. And really this is last weekend review. For review, you can go to my site, which if you're listening this on YouTube later, from when it's being recorded, you already know how to get there, which is Mac Teacher, MacTeach, Mac Teach actually, is my channel on YouTube. But My Citizen U is better. It's just I've had some students who act like they will not listen to My Citizen U, even though those guys have put a lot more thought and time and energy into how they do that than I have, and it shows. They have longish intros in their YouTube stuff, but they do a real good job of analysis. They're two really smart guys. I get the feeling that they're more specialized than I am. I'm teaching a little more broadly as far as the different subjects I teach. So I would go to My Citizen U. And the beauty of it, they have their playlist. They have several playlists. You start that sucker on, you let it go. You don't have to constantly click. You can run through. They have something now called Check Mix, which is they're standing there, they've got their index cards, and they're going over the subject. I think there's 17 of those things. That means, and they run for about 3 minutes each or so. So less than an hour, you got a playlist that'll run for almost an hour, and they'll cover a lot of ground there. And they've got their other stuff, their 60-second AP60X, a bunch of things. Then they've got their longer lectures that will run somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes or so. So there's a lot there. They cover a ton of stuff. I would use them I'm going to try to put my stuff up on there, but I'm telling you right now, I would use My Citizen U first if I were you. Also, you can go to the exam questions section on AP Central. I didn't put up the website on there. It's real simple. Google keywords, AP Central, exam questions, government. It's not, you all know how to Google. Okay, use keywords, Google. All right, for a 142-page cram packet that includes old AP government tests and notes, you can go to this link here. And if you're afraid I won't get it up on YouTube, you might want to write that down. http www.shaker.org downloads AP percentage 20 government percentage 20 dash, yeah, you get the idea. And it is good. It is very good. It is 142 pages. And what this guy has done is he's collected some notes, his notes, somebody else's notes, and some old AP exams that he scanned in and put it all on a PDF. And then some interesting facts on there too. 142 pages. I like it. I like it a lot. Don't forget Study Stack. If you need to search for my stuff, I'm Mr. McNair, but there's some other flashcards on there I didn't do that are good. Remember, though, that teachers and students make these, and some aren't very good, so be selective. If you're going to hit on some flashcards on there to look through, make sure that, they're good. Sometimes people write in such a way that it's so vague and inaccurate that it won't help you too much. You should have kept all the outlines I gave you. I bet a bunch of you didn't, but you should have. Look at the boxes in your textbook and check the glossary for terms you don't know. They have boxes in your textbook for various things that are important to understand. There's probably a box on separation of powers and checks and balances. There might be a box on the powers of Congress. There could be a box on incorporation cases, things like that. And that's another thing. You might want to look up court cases. Look through the court cases, important court cases. I have a list in that comprehensive packet there of court cases and what their subjects are and basically what they do or remind you what they're about. But you might want to look them up and get more detail on them. All of these exams you guys have been taking for other AP classes has kind of shot the review process, and the fact that I'm in a cast right now has slowed me down a lot too. If you haven't already bought a test prep book, you can go that route. You've got a weekend. If you're going to buy one now, don't buy the big thick test prep book. That won't do you much good. I think Barron's is revised, but Barron's used to put out these test prep books that had summaries over the subjects that were way too long as far as a short review. I mean, the old Barron's test prep books, the way you would use them is you would use them at the beginning of a course and throughout. Pearson's usually used to have a shorter kind of booklet on the subject, but the one I really like right now, and it's not the REA, the normal REA book, but the crash course book. And the crash course book is, usually like 100 pages or something like that long, and it's digest shaped. So it's almost like the size of a novel, but it's a digest. I don't know if you know what a digest looks like, but it's not, it's not an 8.5 or 9 by 11.5 or whatever size that most of those test prep books is not like a giant phone book, like the other ones are. It's smaller, and it follows the outline for the AP course. So it'd be good for this course. If you can find a crash course REA book for another test you're taking, it's good for that too. And get enough sleep, and make sure you eat. I got news for you. You don't study well when you're sleepy. And you don't test well when you're sleeping. And you also don't test well when you have a blood sugar crash. Okay, there are all sorts of things you don't want to do. And one thing is you don't want to be mega hungry while you take a test. You don't want to have had tons of sugar and then suddenly your sugar levels drop massively. Lots of things you don't want to do. So don't take your 5 gallons of energy drinks, thinking that's going to help you, because then you're all wired up and distracted by it, because you can't possibly, you're thinking too quickly, and you can't hold a thought, and then all of that sugar washes out of your system halfway through a long test, and now you're dead. Okay, don't do that stuff. All right? I know very clearly what can happen when you cram all night and you go to bed at 3:30 or 4 in the morning and get a couple hours sleep and get up and take your test. One of two things can happen. One is you get lucky and you keep your head clear somehow for the test. I went through college experiences. I know all about this. I had both things happen where, wow, I did well. But then I've had the other thing happen where you go in and you knew all that stuff at 4 in the morning and you went to sleep and then you got up and you never really woke up and you can't process a freaking thought. You can't do it. You can't add 1 plus 3 to make 4. You're that tired. You're too tired that even though you crammed all night, you can't access any of it. You've got a new wall, a new block in the way, and you would have been better off if you'd just gone to bed and not tried to cram. All right? It is gambling to stay up way late at night and try to take a test on just a couple hours sleep. It is a huge gamble. And even if you've done it once or twice or 3 times, sooner or later it's going to get you. You're going to hit that wall. So do yourself a favor and hit this stuff hard, systematically, every day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, but not to the point where you don't get rest. Make sure you're well rested. Remember, 30 minutes on a subject is enough. Take a break. Do something else. 30 minutes back on it. That's the way to do it. If you've got more subjects to study for than just my subject, of course ignore those subjects. I know that's not going to happen. What you do is you can take a break from one subject you study and go to the other one and then go back. All right? But still, you're going to have to do something else. I suggest you get up off of your rear and do something physical for a few minutes after studying for about 30 minutes. Sit down, maybe study the other subject for a while, and then get up, do something physical for a little bit, and then change the subject you study. All right? That's the best best advice I can give you right now.